Welcome to Based on an Adaptation podcast. I am Pamela Portnoy. My guest today is Jeremy Edberg. We'll be talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, directed by Miloš Forman and written for the screen by Lawrence Hauben and Goldman, which is, of course, based on the novel by Ken Kesey. Did I say Ken Kesey right?
See, I've been wondering how to pronounce his name properly myself. I never actually took the time to look into it, but it sounds good to me. I was saying Kesey too.
Fabulous. Just a fair warning to our listeners, there will be spoilers.
I mean, it'll be really lame if we didn't talk about any spoilers the whole time.
Yeah, like how would you even have that conversation?
Plus, I feel like this book is not so, current to the point where if you haven't heard a spoiler to it already, that's on you.
Yeah. And I'm also just like very big on like the courtesy thing of like, I would assume people think that there will be spoilers in a adaptation discussion book group type podcast, but you never know. I might get comments like, how dare you ruin this for me?
Yeah, you're not setting up like an advertisement to go see the movie. You're like talking about it.
Yeah, and it was 1975, won 5 Oscars. Like, if you missed out, you missed out.
Yeah, if you're reading a review by Roger Ebert, there's probably going to be some spoilers in there.
Yes.
Although I'm not comparing myself to Roger Ebert by any means, just so you know.
Well, we'll see. We'll leave it up to the audience to see what they think.
Okay, fair enough.
They might think you're better than Roger Ebert.
I mean, I was going to make a bad joke there, but I don't know how your audience is.
I don't either. Go for it.
Nah.
We haven't released it yet.
It's okay.
I just want my listeners to know Jeremy is brave enough to not know what these questions are in advance.
No. It's more fun this way.
All right, let's go. Are you ready to adapt?
I'm ready to adapt.
Beautiful. Question 1, book before movie or movie before book?
Okay. I'm going to give a little of a gray area answer to that just because if you look, here's the thing about, if you watch a book first, if you read a book first and then watch the movie, there's always a lot of disappointment because the movie sometimes doesn't live up to the way you imagined it. They change little details and do a bunch of stuff that kind of deviate from your universe of the book, which is why a lot of people don't like movies. However, I understand filmmakers and the choices they make to create something adapted for the screen. So, like for instance, one of my favorite books that was made into a movie, and the movie got great reviews, but not from me, the Daniel Day-Lewis movie, Last Mohicans. And I read that book and then I saw the movie, and I know the movie was critically acclaimed, but I thought it was horrible only because of how many plot points they actually changed, to the point where I was so out of it that I lost interest in the movie. But it's also dangerous for a movie to stay really in line with the book because sometimes it doesn't translate well to the screen. So that could be dangerous too.
Yeah.
But for this one, I would have to say it's pretty even in terms of book and movie because they're both brilliant in different ways. So like, I thought
they changed a lot of plot points that I thought were important.
Yeah, you know what? I all the deviations from the book to the movie in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I thought was a smart choice by the writer-director of the movie to make it flow better for the film. And some of the details that they put away from the book that they didn't use were only for someone who understood like a lot of like the themes and motifs that were like ongoing in the book that they had to like bring about that they couldn't really do in the movie. And I thought the way they did it was really well done, unlike Last of the Mohicans, I must say. So like for me, normally I'm always a book first, then movie guy, but there are some movies that were made really, really well and they did the best they could. And I thought this was one of them.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the only people that answered that way. Movie before book sometimes. Well, happy ending. Yes, small way.
Oh, go ahead. What about happy endings? I didn't know it was going to be that type of podcast, but go ahead.
What do you mean you didn't know it would be that kind of podcast?
Oh, with happy endings, but we're going.
No, happy ending or shocking twist?
I don't always like a happy ending because if it's happy for the sake of being just a happy ending, sometimes it's just not what the movie or book is called for. You know, if the theme of the book or movie results in like a nice, satisfying conclusion that's going to leave you like cheery and that's kind of a theme of the book that's going for it, then great. But if like the overall theme is something else and it ends happily, it's not really the best choice, I think.
I like it.
And we know that this book and movie, honestly, it depends how you look at it. If it's happy or tragic, you don't. Mm-mm. See, I could argue against that.
I know you could.
And I probably will eventually when this podcast goes on, just so you know.
Most devastating book death. And this is like in all of books and all literature that you've read. What's a death that stood out to you?
Devastating book death. There's some, I'm just trying to think now what was really hard.
Something in Lord of the Rings? Something in Harry Potter?
I was thinking Lord of the Rings, just of like, but the thing about Lord of the Rings is like all the characters that you really wanted to not die didn't. So that was like, okay. Harry Potter, I mean, there was definitely the death of the twin.
Fred.
Was pretty rough. And also Tonks and Lupin.
Yeah.
Because like that was just kind of like repeating the cycle of the tragedy of Harry Potter's life with the little baby. Yeah. And I was like, ugh, that's sad again. So that was bad. I'm just trying to think of like other books that were really hard.
For that feeling.
I mean, I was just like, come on. Like there was already enough people who died. Now you have to do this. Like, okay. I get why she did it. But
Snape's like the worst for me.
I don't know. Maybe I'll think of an answer that'll like come back to me that was like, oh, you know what was really sad? Did you ever read For Whom the Bell Tolls by Hemingway?
No.
So
it's probably assigned reading at some point that I probably spark noted.
Maybe. I was one of those. I went through a phase where like after I graduated high school and college, I went back and read all like the supposed classics that they assigned to people that I never got assigned. And Hemingway was one of them. So I just like devoured him. And in that book, there was a death that was just like not necessarily surprising, but tragic.
Okay.
But I don't want
I'll have to check it out. I have his compilation. I think you and I have the same copy of that Pretty Blue book, the same compilation.
It's one of those books that's so big that like you're reading one story and you get to the end, but you feel like you're not at the end because you're still in the beginning of that giant textbook.
That's really frustrating for me because one of my favorite parts, I don't like reading on Kindles because I like the feeling of turning to the last pages and like feeling it in my hands.
I cannot read on a Kindle. Even when I'm holding a book that's like bulky and uncomfortable and I'm sitting in bed, I'm trying to like hold it weird and my hand's hurting and this, I still prefer that to a Kindle for some reason. I think it's just because I'm stubborn, but I've tried the Kindle. I just don't like it. It's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I also like how books smell, but you know that I'm weird with smells.
It depends on whose books they are too.
That's true. Favorite fictional couple?
Mm-hmm. Well, my favorite fictional character is Forrest Gump. So like him and Jenny might be my favorite couple, but
really, they're so toxic.
I know. That's what I was saying. She's a bitch most of the time in that movie. So like, favorite couple. That is a good question.
Like not Romeo and Juliet, because they're also fucking stupid and toxic.
No, not ideal for them, I would say. It didn't end too well.
This could be on TV or movies too, this question. Very specific outline for my rapid fire.
No, yeah. Maybe I should have looked at these questions first. I had time to think of like my Rolodex.
No, because now, you're right. Now it's like really authentic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I don't read a lot of books that necessarily have couples in it though. Like I'm not reading a lot of, those types of novels per se. So I don't really have a huge library to choose from in that regard. But just trying to think of like.
Were you a Rose and Jack fan?
I mean, I was
your face.
I was a fan of that movie and the romance because like I've had like a 2-day romance that was like super intense like that movie had before. So I understood the dynamics of it and it didn't end too well for them either. But 90 years later, you got to move on.
Yeah, I would say
however old she was when she threw that blue dot. By the way, that's one of my favorite scenes in all of cinematic history for comedic purposes. When she
drops the diamond.
Oh my God, because she makes that noise and it's the greatest noise. ever.
I know, it always cracked me up.
I know it was meant to be dramatic and like this huge moment, but I crack up every time. It's so funny to me.
That's so funny. Yeah, I always felt that way about that scene too.
It's like you have like one of these like cinematic masterpieces, and then like if I was the director, I would put something silly like that in. But I'm not a, billion-dollar director, so
it just worked out beautifully.
I guess.
That's like one of your favorite memes to use, right? It's been 84 years.
It's been 84 years. That's a long time.
Really long time. Favorite film adaptation?
This was one of them. Lord of the Rings for sure. There's been some good ones. I'm trying to think of Room. Did you ever see Room or read Room with Brie Larson? That's really good.
It's super heavy, yeah.
Yes, it is very heavy. Also,
I feel like I'd have such a rough time with it.
I didn't like the book or the movie that much, but I thought it was well done, The Lovely Bones.
Stanley Tucci.
Because it's just too depressing. It's like literally reading, it's horrifically depressing. Like, I don't know, when I'm reading
I read it and watched it, and I thought they did a beautiful job.
They did it great. Like, it's so real. It's so well done. It's just like, I like The Road. I
read The Road at the start of quarantine.
Smart. Make sure you feel really uplifted to get it. But that's another one. Like, it's very real, authentic, and raw and well done to the point where like this is very realistic and it's very true to what would happen in real life, which makes it very well done. But it's just like, sometimes I want to read books and watch movies to escape from the heaviness of that all.
Totally.
So yeah. I don't know if I would call it like my favorite, but it's well done per se. Maybe I would say second favorite would be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, cool. I don't think I've seen it.
The movie, when you watch it today, it might be like feel a little bit outdated because some of like the weirdness and the effects they use, but between the acting and like what they do in the book, have you ever read any Hunter S. Thompson's books?
Mm-mm.
He's just a wild man. And so like, he really does a good job. Like if the character in the book is on drugs, you know that the author writing it was on drugs. And when you read it, you feel like you're on drugs because you're like, what is happening right now? But it's super good.
Fabulous.
That would be one I would say.
Least favorite?
Last of the Mohicans.
Okay.
Which I know is like an Oscar award-winning film, but like that movie can go fuck itself. They literally like because they changed. It's one thing to change little things in the plot, but to change like massive plot points that they did without going into too much spoiler, it bothered me enough to like I just wrote off the whole movie. Like, this is stupid.
Really?
But
it's so hard to say because it's Daniel Day, and
yeah, the credit of the acting superb. The score, one of the best scores in all the movies. I still listen to it sometimes when I'm like working out, even though it's.
Is it John Williams?
I don't know. Not sure.
Yeah,
but it's so good. You just hear that thematic, and you like. Nah, I can't sing it because I'm not going to.
How is it?
I'm not going to do
it. Favorite actor? Could be male or female.
Favorite actor? I love Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
I love Tom Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman would have to be on the male side. Female side, I would throw Nicole Kidman up there. And there's a lot of great actresses out there. It's hard to say. I really like actresses and actors who do a good job of doing comedic roles and serious roles. So like, that's why I like, Philip Seymour, and what's his name from Step Brothers, John C. Reilly.
So
even Margot Robbie, like she's really good at doing both.
She is.
So
and
like,
I'm going to tell you something. When I was reading this book, I also popped in the audiobook. John C. Reilly reads the audiobook.
Of One Flew Over?
Yeah.
That's good. Does he do all like impressions of the different characters?
Yes, he is incredible.
I want to see like how he does like Mancini and Billy Bibbit.
Out of control. Because
those two characters, I think, are like the most dynamic voice-wise. At least that's what I thought of the book, because there's so much emotion behind what they're saying. And it was, yeah, I got to check it out, that audiobook. I never
He
listen to
really,
audiobooks, but
really works it, and like the stammering and like the emotion. He really takes his time. It's fabulous. Yeah, and Margot Robbie's really good at both too. Favorite fandom?
what does that mean?
What fictional fan universe do you take part in the most?
Oh, Lord of the Rings. It's like
No, but you don't play a Lord of the Rings game in your spare time.
I have played Lord of the Rings.
Oh God, there's Lord of the Rings like fan things that you do.
No, but I played
Potter.
like a Lord of the Rings game on like the PlayStation before or something like that.
Okay.
Harry Potter, yeah, because I play that Harry Potter mobile game and it's super addicting. But I don't really involve myself with fandom too much. Like I'm not one of those like the Star Wars type people or like Game of Thrones, which is the single most overrated thing in the world. But that's just my opinion. I know I'm going to get a lot of your listeners. They're going to turn this off right now. They're going to be like, "Oh my God, I love Game of Thrones." I'm like, it's good, but it's not as good as everyone thinks it is.
For those of you still around, our next question.
Please leave your comments below.
But you haven't read the books, have you?
No, and that's where my opinion could change. I do like fantasy books, and maybe I'll get around to reading them, which will change my opinion a bit. But I mean, 90% of the people who watch the show don't read the books either, and their obsession with it is not that warranted. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's well done. It's good, but like I would give it an 8, 7.5 out of 10, where most people would give it like a 9 or a 10. So it's good. It's like better than average, but it's not like, I don't know. I couldn't get into it. And I like all that fantasy stuff, which is weird, where everyone's like, Jeremy, I can't believe you don't like Game of Thrones. Like that's so up your alley, because I love like Dune and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and all these like fantasy, even like the Star Trek movies. But I can't get into it for some reason.
That's so interesting. I got super into it, but I still haven't finished the series because I was binging it, and
you realize how it's not that great, so you have to stop, right?
No, that's not true. It's excellent.
I know,
it's excellent. But like, spoiler, like Sean Bean's character is killed off like immediately, and I was like, I couldn't recover. I had to take like a year off from watching.
Yeah, I'm tired of watching him die, because Boromir dies in Lord of the Rings.
Terrible death.
I almost brought that up when you said, what's your worst death? But like, I mean, it was part of the, like, it was a super, like his death was a major plot point in the book. So it was like an important death, So
yeah,
I wasn't like disappointed, but I was like, bummer.
Yeah, I love Sean Bean. If you could have drinks with any author, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, Hemingway would be one, because he's an alcoholic, and I think it'll be fun. So
that'd be a fucking crazy night.
Definitely Hunter S. Thompson. There's an author that writes nonfiction named Graham Hancock, who's still around, who's like
Fingerprints of the Gods, right?
Yeah, he wrote Fingerprints of the Gods and a few other. He wrote a couple fictional novels too. His take on and his research on like ancient civilizations and history and stuff would be an amazing dinner conversation to have with him. I've actually wrote him, I think, a letter on his website that he didn't get back to me. But
what'd you write him?
I don't know. It was years ago. I think after I read the book, I was like, I don't even know if I sent it. I'm trying to remember. Maybe I should. Another one that I think I would love to sit down with is Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club.
Nice.
And Coke and like Diary and a bunch of other good books. He's just got a different mind than most authors. He's got like this dark, twisted, kind of satirical view of the world, and it comes across in his books well. And I think him and I have a lot of similar mental headspace. So it would be a fun conversation to have with that guy for sure.
Would you ever be in a fight club?
No, because there's no prize money. I know it goes against the whole theme of the book, but like,
yeah.
I'm a pretty peaceful dude. I like to fight with my words and not with my body, even though I could probably beat most people up that don't know how martial arts work, but I don't really want to get in fights. I don't want to hurt anyone.
That's not how you let off steam.
No.
What is your favorite book or film quote?
This one maybe would have been good to look before, because I think I have some written down somewhere that I really like.
And this is the last question, just so you know.
Well, one of my favorite book quotes that I just like because it stems from my childhood is from 1984, but it was created into a song lyric by Rage Against the Machine, which is why I kind of like it so much. It was like, who controls the past, controls the future, who controls the present, controls the past, and something like that.
Okay.
And it was, it's from, I think it's from Guerrilla Radio, one of those, or Testify, one of those Rage Against the Machine songs that I heard my whole life. And then I remember reading 1984 and came across that line, and I was like, oh my God, that's where they got this line from. And I got super excited. I think that's one that comes to mind. But there's a bunch. I probably have like highlighted stuff in my pages all over the place of things that I'm like, oh, this is a good line. This is a good one.
You highlight as you read?
If it's sometimes, like if it's my book, a lot of times I borrow books or go to the library or whatever. But if it's mine, yeah, I'll underline or highlight or circle a page here and there just to like go back to, get inspired for something. Especially for nonfiction books. Like if I see something that I want to go back to, I'll definitely circle it or highlight it if I can.
Beautiful.
What's your favorite?
You made it. My favorite quote?
Uh-huh.
One that just popped up at me was, of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but what something like what?
It doesn't mean it's not real.
What does that mean it's not real? Yeah.
Yeah. You're like the third person that has told me that that's their favorite because it's in the book and the movie.
Oh, that's so basic of me then.
No, because it's really good. I mean, listen, a lot of things that are stereotypical or basic or this is for a reason because they're really, really well done and good. So yeah, I like that line too. Anything that's going to like be more of a meta analysis of life in general that has like stuck in one line, I enjoy.
I thought of that quote actually, and I actually wrote this down because I think Bromden says it's the truth even if it didn't happen.
Yeah, there was actually a couple, I think I wrote one down if I can, that Bromden said. Oh yeah, here he said, I actually wrote the page down, but he's talking about things about when he's looking at McMurphy. He's saying how I want to touch him because of this. I want to do this because he's this. But he's like, no, that's a lie. And then he says, I just want to touch him because he is who he is.
Yeah.
And he was trying to figure out justifications why he was so attached to this guy. And he kept coming up with something. He's like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. And he like goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And he realizes like the core essence of why McMurphy's such a magnanimous, like, why he draws so many people in and why he has such an influence is because of the coreness of his character is like he's true to himself and he's not a conformist. So like that's really what proliferates the whole story, you know? And so he kind of narrows it down into that one little line. I was like, that's a good one.
That's a really good one for sure.
Okay, so I've read and seen this book and movie a couple times. So I saw it once and read it once a while ago and then reread it and watched it for this.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since I did. And I remember the first time, I think I was probably in like high school or something, maybe a little older. And I was a little disappointed in like the chief's place in the movie because he is like the integral part. He's the voice, he's the narrator, he's the mind of the book. Mm-hmm. And I didn't remember him being that at all in the movie. But after rewatching it now, older and like analyzing it, I realized is how much influence and where he was in the movie, subtlety, and especially if you read the book, you kind of like realize is like the chief is still like the voice, the narrator, the reader's mind.
Really? How do you see that?
It was a lot of directorial choices. Like there were moments in the movie that happened where like there was something going on and then it just panned over to the chief expression, like not expressionless, but just like not really saying anything, obviously. And him creating like this look with his eye or this thing where he like understood or didn't understand or was against or for something that they showed the chief. And then also the music, like the score of the movie was Native American, like influenced by far. A lot of the imagery and the nature was in that regard. So like it had the undertones of the chief throughout the movie, even though he wasn't like a focal point in the movie. And obviously his influence on the outcome of every, like in the movie and the, like when you meet in the clash of the conflicts in the book that gets resolved by the chief, kind of, I think.
I don't know. I feel like, yes, they made some interesting choices that still made that you could still see that he was observing everything and it was sort of from his point of view. But you still didn't get like his delusional aspect.
Right. And that's where, so that's where I say like a movie can not use stuff from the book, but still do a really good job. So like, obviously a lot of his like dreams and delusions and things in the inner workings of his head and like the fog and the clearing of the fog and all these things and his like take on the control of the hospital and the Combine is like, it's prevalent throughout the entire book. And you can't really show that in the movie.
The theme of the Combine is shown just by like the nature of the story.
Right. So like you're not going to get the little bits of symbolism you would get through his imagery in the book about like things that, like, for instance, when he's talking when he has that vision about like, or the memory of the dog and the car and the birds and like how the birds represent, the freedom and the nonconformity, and the car represents like the hustle and bustle of the control of the Combine. And then you have the dog kind of stuck somewhere in the middle. But in his eyes, like the dog is heading straight for the car and it's going to get crushed by it because, that's who we are as a society. Like we're just under the persecution of this totalitarian sort of like thing. And that's where his resolve is. And the book slowly goes from that like under control, and there's just breaking points throughout the whole book that lead to like them being able to like liberate themselves mentally to like do it for real.
And this is actually why I don't think it's a happy ending, because he takes off running like the dog and he's heading into civilization like the dog, and he's heading towards disaster.
But doesn't he get a hitchhiker and go to Canada and escape?
Does it say that in the book?
I thought so.
I mean, at least in the movie, it leaves it on a tone of...
Which I like. I like movies that do that end when you're like, so what? Like at the end of Inception or something, when you're like, you really don't know what's going to happen. But I thought the movie, like, they made McMurphy in the book and in the movie, like, he's Jesus, basically, right?
Yes.
So, like, I mean, there's so much imagery in the book. They talk about him leading his 12 people, obviously. He takes them out. He takes them out to sea. Crown of Thorns. They literally hook him up to the lobotomy table, and it's described as like a cross. And he willingly goes on, and he's got the crown of thorns. And so, like, there's all this Jesus imagery, and he's like sacrificing himself.
Literally healing the sick. He's turning water into wine because he's getting everyone to drink.
Yeah. And McMurphy himself doesn't have a happy ending, but I think his sacrifice as that Jesus character led to, several of the patients checking themselves out of the hospital or getting transferred. It led to Bromden escaping, realizing that he has the power to, he's not under control of this. And like, even the whole thing, it's like him slowly getting the characters to like realize that they're not under the confines of the institution or Ratchet. And like, he does such a good job of doing that. And even when the characters think that he's in it for selfish reasons, when they're like, oh yeah, you're just in it for gambling and stealing your money, he's like, no, that was just for fun. Like, I'm cool with you guys. Like, well, let me show you how I really like, I'm on your team. When he basically starts picking fights with the Black Aides, I think Washington, that he ends up standing up for George, right, in the book, when George doesn't want to get cleaned, and he's like throwing a hissy fit, and then McMurphy kind of stands up for him, saying like, listen, I'm standing up for you guys no matter what, and standing up to the system, and you guys got to follow suit. And one detail that I thought the movie was smart for taking it out, because it would have been too heavy, was Cheswick.
He was so lovable that it would have been too much to kill him.
Exactly. So I think like as a cinematic choice of him just not dying like he did in the book was good, because we had to deal with the death at the end, right? Two of them really, but the one that was kind of like more heartbreaking was probably Billy Bibbit. So you have Cheswick, who's the only guy.
It hit me more reading the book than watching the movie with Billy.
Yeah, because Cheswick, like, he does this whole thing where he stands up. He's the only one in the meeting to stand up with McMurphy when he challenges Ratchet, and he gets shut down, right? And then he does it again, and he gets shut down. And he's a representation of like fighting against the system and getting beaten down. And then he tries and fails, and he can't deal with it anymore. So it's like a insinuated suicide, even though he like drowns. Like, you can read it either way. It's still it makes sense. Like if he committed suicide or he was killed, it like literally makes sense. But then then you have characters like Bencini, who says I'm tired all the time. Because they say in the book, I think at one point he did something to stand up to the system or ratchet or this and that, and then they just fucked him with these like treatments and the shock therapy and this, and now he's like I'm giving up. Like he's just tired of like fighting, giving up, and he won't conform at all. And he's conforming, but he won't help the cause at all. So anytime they try to get Bencini to like do stuff with the group, he's like, I'm tired. I can't do this. Like he represents like that part of society where it's just like giving up and the system got to him. Whereas Cheswick represents like defiance, but failure. And then McMurphy represents like defiance, but sort of success. At least that's the way I read it. Because he had that influence on all the other characters. Including Billy Bibbit. Like just like obviously it didn't end well, but he got him to like.
In the book, is Tabor also, was he lobotomized in the book? But I didn't get that in the movie.
So I could be wrong about this, but I think there was a big distinction in the book and the movie where it said in the book that Scanlon, aside from Chief and McMurphy, were the only ones to be committed. The rest were voluntary. Mm-hmm. But in the movie, it was Tabor. Mm-hmm. And I think it's only because, what's his name, who plays Tabor in the movie?
Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, Chris Lloyd. He was so good in it. And he was just so good at playing that character that I think they just kind of changed that detail. That wasn't really important for the movie because Scanlon was kind of a really minor character.
Yeah.
In the movie, at least. So they switched that detail, I'm pretty sure, but it didn't really make much. So those are the things that when movies switch details that I'm okay with.
Yeah, because it's not like crucial to the integrity of the story.
Exactly. And I'm like obsessed with this book and movie. I thought and then watching the performances like at the end was just like Jake Jack's performance was just stellar. But I thought Billy Bibbit, what's his name? The guy who plays Wormtail in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Brad Dourif.
What's his name? Brad Dourif?
Dourif, I think, is how you pronounce the last name. Brad Dourif.
He's sensational. And after I watched the movie, I immediately went to the internet and I was like, Oscar nominations for Best Supporting Actor. And like, he was nominated for an Oscar, so he deserved it.
He honestly deserved it. It won film,
but I mean, if you get
screenplay, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director.
Yeah, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It won a few. And then it got nominated for a bunch. And even, I don't know, when it comes to the Oscars, I feel like if you get a nomination, winning it's subjective. But like, if you're a nominee for Best Actor, you know, that's enough to be like, you killed it.
Totally. And a lot of time it's political too, but this film totally deserved it. I thought it was
Oscars, it's political, but I mean, if I was on the committee, I would have put him up for sure.
Yeah, like, he was fabulous.
He was so good in it. His like subtleties and facial expressions and like emotions that he would do and how his thought process would change in a second, but he didn't say anything. You just saw it in his eyes. Like as an actor, I'm not an actor, so I feel like that's a really hard thing to do. Like there was a scene in the movie where kind of Jack Nicholson realizes, or McMurphy realizes.
Stays on him a long time. I think I know the scene that you're talking about. Camera stays on him a long time. The director
where he kind of like has that oh shit moment where he's like, I am not in the place I thought it was. I don't have the control I thought I did. I'm under the jurisdiction of these fucks. And like my whole world is about to change and the whole way I act is about to change. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't really move much. You just kind of see like the super subtleties in his expression. I was like, damn, that's why he's in this movie and not anyone else's, you know?
I also really like Danny DeVito's performance.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he didn't have like a huge role in the movie. He's so good. He's just so likable.
He's lovable. Same with Cheswick, totally lovable. But like, I don't know, he really nailed it. It's very hard because he like nailed the mannerisms of the character, but also like, so it's harder to see when something's affecting, you know, him in a negative way because he's constantly like laughing and he's always smiling, but you could totally see when he was, you know, feeling an insult or, you know, feeling, you know, put down. Yeah,
to me, he was one of the most interesting characters because he towed the line between sane and crazy better than anyone. Because because the whole time you're like, one of the themes of this movie is like the subjectivity of these guys' craziness is like all all perspective. And so like and there's some things he does where he realizes he's pretty on top of things and he's not as like crazy as you think he is. Whereas like he does little things here and there, but he's like, oh, he actually is like pretty normal guy, especially like that whole scene when he's on the boat.
Yeah.
And okay, that was also a huge distinction from the book and the movie, the way all that went down.
Oh, yeah, because it was like a thing that was voted on. It was basically a field trip in the book, and Nurse Ratched was totally trying to
if they did everything, but
right. And so this was more of a rebellious escape that, and he hijacks the bus. Kind of.
Yeah, I thought when he hijacks the bus, that was kind of a little unrealistic. I don't know how it went down in the 60s, but like I would assume like they would have chased after him with like, the police were waiting for him when he got back, but I was like, they got away with a lot for just hijacking a bus full of mental patients and not much going down.
They did. And I can't believe that like he wasn't seen jumping the fence, because
I thought about that, but then you realize that like McMurphy has also lived his whole life kind of out of the eye of the combine, and he's like himself. So like, and there was two dudes out on the play guard playing basketball, and he's just like, all right, I'm gonna escape just to show you guys how easy it is. Like, you guys can do it anytime you want, and watch this. And the fact that he escapes and doesn't abandon them and escapes only to help them all is like a character to like McMurphy, where he's like, his humanity shines through, even though he's like a degenerate gambler and he's like a, what's it called when you like having sex a lot? There's a word for it. Nymphomaniac. And he's like all these things.
He also is a rapist. In the book.
Yes.
Both the book and the film, but it's worse than the book.
Well,
now that there's like degrees of worse or better of being a rapist, but it's less. I don't know how to explain it.
I don't condone his actions in the book or the movie. However, I tried to put in the context of the time, and if it was a 15-year-old girl.
Isn't she 9 in the book?
No, that's a different story. That's when he lost his virginity.
Got it.
He was 10 and she was 9. And that deals with like throwing the pants out the window, and it's still hanging there to this day when they go back to visit his hometown.
Yes.
So that was the story of him when he was younger. But I think the reason he got sent to Pendleton or wherever for the statutory thing was she was 15, but he was saying how she represented like womanhood and all her sexuality. And it's like, I'm sorry, but like that's blah, blah, blah. And Randall McMurphy, more so in the book than the movie, is a big sexual character. Like, there's so much image. Like Ratched is the opposite, right? She's described with these like the best tits in the world, but she hides them from everyone because she wants to like hide her femininity. And she even wears like the dominating hat. That's kind of like the, and McMurphy comes out in his boxers and like talks. He's always talking about
White Whales, which is a Moby Dick reference.
Exactly. And like, he's got the prostitutes and this and that, and he's just trying to have a good time. But, a lot of the strict rules on society, I think his whole thing was like, yeah, technically it was statutory rape under the laws of the combine, under the rules of society. But like, she was super willing, more than I was. She's already felt like a woman. I did this, like under your rules, yeah, it's statutory rape. But for me, like I was just living the life organically. And I think he doesn't necessarily like is happy with his actions, but like he doesn't super regret it either, because he knows like it was more so going against the system than going against like natural human nature. I mean, if you look back in like Roman times, these girls were having babies and popping them out at 12, So
I don't know how I feel about how women are represented in this book, because I feel like there are two extremes of women represented in this book. One is they're prostitutes, or they are emasculating men, like ball-busting women, like Nurse Ratched and like Bromden's mom. Or they're prostitutes literally being used by the men.
Yeah. That's true. It didn't represent women great.
But I think there's only one character in the book where it's like I think it's the other nurse that's like really kind.
Oh, the Japanese
that was like
one. Yeah, she was great.
Right. I think that was the only woman like somewhere in the middle that, of those two extremes.
But I mean, if you look at it in that way, like when Bromden's dad took his mom's name, it was more so for the shame of the Native American side of things, integrating and like being seceding to society, than it was like the power of women too. So yeah, you have a point there. But
I do feel like McMurphy in the film was made out to be more of a hero than he is in the book.
Really?
I feel like in the book, he is more volatile, more violent, more...
Oh, see, I mean, he's only violent at the end. I feel like he actually does a good job of not being violent for the, like, it's almost a point of making him not violent, I thought, in the book.
I mean, he was breaking the glass.
He was breaking the glass, which was just kind of like a physical representation of him breaking through society, right? You know, like the wall between like Ratchet's control and the patient's subjectivity, like was him punching through the glass. And even when he knew the glass was fixed, like, oh, whoops, I thought it was still there or whatever, or it wasn't there anymore. And he punches through it again. And then what's his name breaks it again, right? One of the other patients, was it Cheswick?
I forget who it was.
I think it was Cheswick, another act of defiance that he did to try to like, and then he, you know, couldn't handle it. But
who do you think is the hero? Do you think it's McMurphy or do you think it's Bromden?
Oh no, Bromden's not the hero at all. I would say
he is the character that I think changes the most.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's like, he goes through the biggest transformation for sure in terms of his just perception on the world and his place in it and what he thought was one way. I mean, just there's like some obvious imagery that he represents.
I love the line where he says, "You're bigger than me."
Yes, I remember that one too. And that struck a chord, and they included it both in the book and the movie. Yeah, that was really good. Did you like that actor's performance, the chief?
Yeah, I thought he was great.
Yeah, I thought he was.
I liked everybody.
Yeah, there were really no weak points. Even the Washington and Creevy and all like the aides were really good. Although they talk about Bromden's hands in the book at being like these massive hands because he's so big. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're the actor's real hands or not, but in the movie he had these massive hands. And I don't know if he's wearing prosthetics or not, but they were like absurd. Like it looked like they were like, I don't know.
I didn't notice.
The biggest hands I've ever seen, like just massive hands. And it was, the chief is great. And when he talks about like, he finally has a memory of why he's deaf and mute in the hospital from when he was in his childhood, about like the white people basically metaphorically just not seeing or hearing them. Mm-hmm. And then he becomes like a physically embodiment of not being seen or heard throughout his life because he's pushed down by the Combine. And only when he's getting this second wind from McMurphy and all these things he's doing does he realize that he can be like seen and heard. And that's when he starts talking and, you know, literally breaks the glass to go through to the outside. I thought that was like, he definitely has the biggest change. I mean, you can argue other characters had big changes and they did, but they're not to the level of Chief because Chief escapes and the other ones either die or stay in the ward. You know, like Cheswick and Billy Bibbit, like they went through changes, but not enough to like get to the resolution that they wanted. Chief was the only one who made it through the other way. The other characters that they didn't really mention who like left the ward, this and that, but Chief was the only one who like did a full like beginning to end transformation. Like Billy Bibbit like got almost there and then he couldn't deal with it and had to go back, you know?
Yeah. I think the gum metaphor is really interesting too. I don't know if it's a metaphor, if I'm using that word correctly right now, but
that's gross. He's eating all the gum under his bed all the time.
It's so gross, but I feel like it makes sense because it's almost like he's biting his tongue. Like he has, like his mouth wants to form words, but he's literally just keeping himself quiet with his obsession with his gum.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a specific reason why they chose Juicy Fruit or that was just like a popular gum in the 60s, but I was thinking about that, like why Juicy Fruit out of all gums?
It sucks because it runs out of flavor so quickly.
Oh, I know. Remember that zebra gum?
Yeah.
It was like the best gum in the world for about 10 seconds. And then it lost all its flavor.
I felt about Bubblicious, the watermelon one.
Yeah, Bubblicious is great. But like you start drooling so much because you're salivating so much because these giant pieces of gum in your mouth.
That's amazing. I had one more thought. Oh, you brought it up a little bit ago about how they didn't like seem all that crazy. I think you know that I tackled Girl Interrupted a few weeks ago. And it's also a theme that I found in that one where these people that are supposed to be portrayed as like, you know, mentally ill, actually there are certain aspects of them that seem more sane than people like that are not considered mentally ill.
I mean, that was McMurphy in a nutshell.
McMurphy and also like Martini and Cheswick. And it's just people feeling emotion so strongly and really living in their truth that it's bursting out of them.
Yeah, he is who he is. That's why he wants to touch him. You know, like even every character is flawed, and being flawed and different and unique is not necessarily a sign of being crazy just because you're not with the majority of people acting a certain way. You know, that's why like people gravitate towards oddballs a lot because they're different. And even though they're not like perfect in every way, like people like those types of people who are not going to just do what everyone else does, because it's natural human behavior to want to just conform. Like you get more people to agree with you get more people to be on your team, this and that. And it's harder to like stand out and be different. But I never saw Girl Interrupted or read the book, so I can't really speak to anything on that. But in terms of like, okay, so in the movie, when he gets to the shipyard and the guy comes out, he's like, "You're not taking this boat out." And he's like, "We are a special team of doctors from the mental institution of Rome. This is Dr. Cheswick and Dr. Bibbit and Dr. da-da-da."
Every time the camera would cut to one of them, the pride on their face.
Exactly. And that's a directorial choice that he made subtly that they did in the book for a longer period of time. Like each character in the book had this sense of like pride in who they were.
Yeah.
Because they were now thinking like if other people look at them like this, they can look at themselves that way, and they're able to be more of who they can be. And the book was really good because they did both sides. Like in the book, when they went to the gas station first to fill up, and they were getting made fun of all the time, especially Candy, and they were hitting on her, and no one was standing up for her. And then they were like, but they said that he was, or it was at the shipyard, there's no one standing up for it, but they were saying how they're all crazy lunatics, and like they had a pride in their craziness. Like, yeah, we're fucking crazy. We can get away with a lot. Like we're more powerful than we think they are. And then at the end, when they realized that they did a good job of like when they were on the boat, they took McMurphy out of the equation. He was literally like handling his business down below, and they didn't need him, and they were able to like function and do well without McMurphy. And they realized this in surprise. So when they got back to the yard, they were like having drinks with the guys, and they were like, they felt like they were part of, like they weren't crazy anymore. And they did that briefly with that scene when they're like, "We're Dr. This." But then in my head, I was also just like, where are you going to get like 9 doctors on a boat? Like even at a medical convention, like there's going to be like at least one of them be like a nurse or something. Like we got like 9 doctors here.
Well, Harding was the only one who wasn't introduced as a doctor, which I thought was hilarious.
He actually is. Isn't he a professor or like?
I don't know what Harding's background is.
I really like Harding's character in the book a lot because he was a super intellectual, and the only reason
so articulate.
So I don't think he would have been in. If this book was written today, Harding's character wouldn't have worked because he was homosexual, right?
Yeah.
So in the eyes of the world, it was a bad thing to be, and he couldn't live with his wife and conform to society and do all the things he wanted to do. So he was in this place, right, where he can feel like. I was in the mental hospital, but he's not crazy. He's a super smart guy just because he doesn't get along with like the conformity of society. And in the book, same thing. Like he goes really into details, and he's really analytical about things. But even his analytics change. Like in the beginning, when he's like standing up for Ratchet and standing up for the system, like this is the status quo. Like he found his place in conforming. But then at the end, when he's like tells him he's not a rabbit anymore, he's or whatever he said. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, now Harding changed. So I always got to see instances like when each character, like when Cheswick like broke the glass or stood up for her, like he was changing. When Billy Bibbit finally had sex with the prostitute, then that was his like, I'm getting over like the femininity bringing me down, or like my mother, like all these things in society. When Chief obviously is pretty obvious, and you just see all these like subtle changes in the characters. And the only ones I think who didn't change in the book were the ones who stayed on the ward. Like at the end, when like the only ones left were like Scanlan, Chief or whatever, and then you're like, oh, Chief, I thought he was changing, and he's like, watch this, and he fucking lifts up the thing and throws it out the window. It made me want to go work out after I saw that scene.
Yeah, and the other people that didn't change, of course, are like Nurse Ratched, and
she's not going to change. Yeah, she was that actress. What's her name?
That is Louise Fletcher.
Yeah, she was great.
She won an Oscar for that performance.
It's weird though, because like Nurse Ratched has become like a colloquialism, like a modern day meme. Like when you're a Nurse Ratched, you're like this like bitchy, controlling, domineering character. She's become like into the zeitgeist.
I think there's also a new show called Ratched.
Oh, really?
Audition for it.
She did a really good job of, in the book and in the movie, of like, she's not a bitch. Like, she's not a bad person. Like, that's where, see, this is where I had trouble trying to figure this out, because like she's not like,
she's stuck in her beliefs.
She has decent intentions, but her intentions are
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. They're stemming from the combine of not a good system. So she's trying to uphold that no matter what. So she's trying to uphold what she thinks is like the proper status quo. But obviously the author and McMurphy and the reader are against it. Like, I think if you met Miss Ratched for a cup of coffee, she'd be like a pleasant woman. But her place in the book and the movie, like, she's just like a physical representation of that type of thing. Like, I don't classify her as just like a super bitch for being a super bitch, you know? I mean, McMurphy calls her in context. I was like, for the 70s, that was a pretty good
Totally.
I don't know. This is your first time reading and watching the movie, though. What did you think? What was your impression? You like it?
I'm obsessed with the film. I think it's a masterpiece.
So good. Are there any like film choices, not even to do with the book, that you like stood out to you that you liked?
I mean, I thought the casting was brilliant. Loved everybody's performance. And I think the director, Miloš Forman, he really let the actors roll with it. I mean, I feel like in older movies, directors kind of take advantage of, the longer takes on actors. Like, it was very clear, like, they just set the camera on Jack Nicholson and on Brad Dourif and just let them do their thing, because you'd see them thinking, which you don't really see very often in modern cinema anymore. Now it's kind of like the editing is based on plot, action, right, pacing. This was really letting them just act and be the characters.
And I thought every time you watch a movie, there might be like one or two actors who like, you can tell they're not fully embodying the character and there's like a little acting going on. Mm-hmm. But like with this movie, I tried to pick out a character who was like, even some of the minor ones, like the aides or like the side nurses or like some of the minor acutes and disturbed people, like every character, it was almost like watching a film crew in a real, like these guys nailed it. Mm-hmm. Especially for me, like Billy Bibbin and Tabor, Chris Lloyd's character, like you could tell like you could also tell like they all really read the book and understood the characters really well before they went into acting it. Mm-hmm. So obviously McMurphy and Jack Nicholson, he nailed it. I was wondering, this is something I couldn't understand though, and I was trying to figure it out and I didn't feel like looking it up on the internet or something, but obviously McMurphy's a redhead in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's a very prevalent theme. His red hair comes up a lot. And I'm wondering like why that choice, because in the movie he didn't even have red hair. But like I was wondering why they made that choice in the book to have him red hair. I wonder if it's just like a stark contrast to everyone. Like redheads are usually the outliers, like there's less of them, like they're more like standoutish. I don't know if it's for that reason.
I think it's entirely likely.
I didn't know if it was like a sexual thing or like, because there's a lot of sexual imagery in the book more so than the movie, but yeah, I don't know. I was like, why is he like so an adamant redhead in this book? But like, I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like it might be like an outlier.
Yeah, maybe.
Was there anything else that stood out to you?
I mean, it was not really like stood out per se. I did like the tone of the movie, the way they captured, like, for 1 second you think it's like lighthearted in nature and it flips to like serious real fast, to the point where, like, whether it was the actors or the way it was shot or the plot, where you're like, oh, this is funny, oh no, it's not so funny anymore, and then it goes back to being funny again. I think the movie originally was described as a comedy, but it's definitely not a comedy. There are funny moments in it, but it's not a comedy. And
I was
it's almost like a tragedy, really. But oh yeah, there's funny moments. The characters are hilarious.
They really are. And like I was cheering with like their small victories.
Like when Chadwick is like, I want my cigarettes.
Yeah, that was so good. I also, when Chief was playing basketball, and he was like walking from one side to the other, and then he started running from one side to the other.
Smile on his face.
I absolutely loved it.
It reminded me, though, I had a roommate my freshman year of college. He was kind of like Chief. Like, he actually kind of looked like him too. He was 6'6", big, friendly, giant type guy. He like never touched a ball in his life, like sport wise. And I'm like, oh, what a waste of a body. Like, if I was 6'6", I'd be like, I would have played collegiate sports. I would have done something with it. This guy's like a super smart intellectual guy that I lived with. And I was like, oh man. And that's how I felt about Chief. I was like, but he did play football, and he brought up a lot of football references in the book.
Yeah.
The Chief was a very complex character, and it was a lot smart. Like, he's a really, really smart, analytical guy who got screwed over by the system and all the shock treatments and everything he did to put him in his place. But the fact that he's able to break free from all that and still go on, I think, is just like where Ken Kesey is like, this is where I want the reader to like go for. I mean, that's kind of like books and good movies in general. Like, you have a conflict in the book, and the climax of the book is basically the outcome of what happens when those two conflicts meet. And the Chief kind of meets with his, he could either stay, he's still left on the ward after McMurphy's gone and everything, and he can go back to being his ways, or he can like choose to break free, and he like makes that choice. It's like in Moby Dick, came up earlier, like I think the theme of Moby Dick, and I'll be honest, I never read the whole book. I did do a lot of the Cliff Notes version when I was younger, for sure.
I know the general theme of and plot points of what happens, but I never.
Kind of like man versus nature, and like that's the conflict, and then the winner is nature. Where it's like, can man transcend nature? According to the author, no. Like if Captain Ahab was able to kill that whale at the end. Spoiler alert for everyone who didn't read Moby Dick yet, but I think like get on it.
Too late.
If he was able to like get the whale, then it would be like man's triumph over nature. But the author didn't see it like that. The same reason why like this author, when he broke free at the end, even though McMurphy died, like he was the Jesus character, like dying for everyone else's sins, and they were able to like. And I'm not even Christian, let alone religious, but like I do enjoy a lot of like biblical allusions to things because I think they're interesting in the way they show up in things. Like, showed really well how this author's like express like your individuality, even if it may be crazy and you're stuck in this confined system. Like, you have to be you more than anything else, because that's like the most important thing. And that was the most important thing to the Chief, who, that's the reason why I thought McMurphy was so much bigger than him, is because he was able to be himself, able to be what the Combine would call a loose cannon, but he's not. He's just kind of like, and in the movie, I think Jack Nicholson says to like the characters, like, you're not any crazier than those guys out on the outside, like all the people that he knows out in the real world. He's like, you guys are tame compared to some of these lunatics out in the real world. And he's just showing how like, these rules are complete constructs, and like we have to be able to see past those to like express our individuality. And that's kind of why I like this book so much, because I tend to not conform a lot with people, myself. So like for me, it was like, yeah, I am going to be more of myself. And it teaches people to like be proud of who they are and not look at themselves as crazy. Because people are.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I feel like you're right. It's like a theme, especially in like the 60s, 70s with these mental institutions, like people would be put in for just being depressed.
Yeah.
Like things that everyone goes through at some point were considered, taboo and not acceptable for society. And they were just locked up and given crazy treatments for things like that.
Yeah, and I think this book was ahead of its time too, because it was written in the early 60s, right?
This was in the 60s, 63, I think. 67?
Right. And the movie came out in the 70s. So the movie, I think, consciously made the choice where the book like was ahead of its time, because it was the book and the movie sandwiched the whole psychedelic late 60s Vietnam War kind of break free of society type movement. So the movie, I think, realized that whole movement happened, and they were kind of like it was kind of directly relating to that whole like Vietnam, like break free from the conformity, whatever. But this took place all before that. So I thought like Ken Kesey already had a head up on like what was going on in the world and society during that time, even before like the actual revolution started in the world, in America at least. And I was like, damn, he saw it before it actually happened or anyone else did. And I was like, that's pretty impressive.
I mean, could it be argued that like any sort of movement or revolution only happens when something hits a boiling point? Like, so it probably was in the pulse of the society for a while.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I don't remember the 60s too much myself, but you know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't either.
And I was like, I want to ask my parents, but they were like, what, 8, 9? So like maybe I don't like.
Yeah, parents were like.
I'll ask my grandpa, see what he says.
Yeah. Jeremy, thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome. This was fun, and I'm glad I got to re-dive into this book and movie because it was super good.
It was so good. Thank you for recommending it. This was an excellent choice. I'm very happy I finally got to. I think like some of the parts of the film, I think I've seen clips maybe in film school, but I don't think I've ever watched it from start to finish. So I am obsessed with it, and I really enjoyed the book as well.
I just have one more question for you, just because like you're as an actress, like
I don't want to wrap it up, but I know you have to go. So like
I don't have to go for a little bit, but there's something that I really love literature and I write a little bit. So like whenever I read something that is so well put together and literarily and like thought out and read and like written so well, it pisses me off. Like I remember reading this book and getting angry because of like how well it was written and put together and thought out. And I was just like, fuck, like it's so good it bothers me. And I feel like you're probably the same when you're watching the movie in a lot of ways, where like some of these acting performances or some of like the directing just like it pisses you off of how good it is, and you're like, like
I had that moment with Brad Dourif's character with Billy.
Yeah. And I'm not even an actor, and I was watching I'm like, damn, these guys are good. And I was just like, it's inspiring in a lot of ways, but I'm still like, fuck, like I'm angry of how good it is, and like I want to like do something even close to this would make me happy, you know?
That's so funny. Yeah, no, there's a mixture of awe and jealousy, but it's not like a destructive jealousy. It's an aspirational jealousy.
And that's the best. I mean, that's, I think, a big flaw in people in general is when they get jealous instead of inspired. Like, if you see someone doing something that you want to do and they're doing it better than you, instead of getting angry at it, be like, okay, now go do it, or find out what they're doing and how they're doing it and get better at it. So that's kind of how to, like, right now I'm learning how to play the drums. I'm pretty bad compared to most drummers. I'm not very good at all, but I want to get better. So I'm watching videos online and seeing these guys, and I'm watching them move, and I'm like, I get angry. Like, I can't like do that, but I know if I put in the time, it'll work. And for like anything. So I don't know. And the same with Hemingway. I remember like that was also one obvious author I read that I was get so fucking angry. Like, how can you be so drunk all the time and write these like works of like, no, I got so mad at like how good it is, and it still holds up, 60, 70, 80 years later. And I was like, what the fuck?
I don't know. The drunk thing, like I feel like a lot of authors that I talk to, and I wish I had this quote in front of me, but it was.
I didn't even remember writing Carrie. He was so fucked up.
That's so funny. I think I'm going to tackle Carrie very soon. I'm very excited about it. But I
read half of it when I was younger, and then I just stopped. I don't know why.
I don't know if it was Hemingway. My friend Jackson knows what I'm talking about, but there's this quote about writing. He says it all the time. It's write drunk, edit sober.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And like, I brought up earlier, Thompson.
Your creativity with alcohol. That's why so many of them were drunk.
And cigarette smokers, like they all say, like the nicotine in cigarettes and everything, like influences the creative processes. But also as like a personal trainer, I can't be smoking cigarettes and drinking all day. So like I gotta figure out how to do this somewhat sober.
Yeah, we don't want you smoking cigarettes. Fascinating.
So wait, what's your next project for the adaptation?
Picture of Dorian Gray.
Is it sad that I'd never heard of that book or nor movie?
Really?
I mean, maybe like it kind of rings a bell, but like if you would ask me literally anything about it, I couldn't give you one detail.
I think I saw like an adaptation of it years ago, but it was basically, I'm going to butcher it, but man painting this thing. It's a self-portrait and he puts all his like ugliness into it. I don't know.
Oh, now that you're saying it, it rings a bell.
All the things inside him. It's funny that like you asked me that question about does people's talent make me angry? And then we're blending it with Dorian Gray, the person that I think I showed you a painting that someone just painted me of Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
I'm tackling Dorian Gray with that person. And this person only started painting at the beginning of quarantine.
Oh, these asshole prodigies piss me off.
I swear to God. And so when he showed me the picture of this painting that he was going to give me, I was like, I yelled at him. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, where do you get the balls? How dare you?
Some people's brains are wired
show up with this fucking piece of art and you've only been doing this for a couple of months? Like, yeah.
Not all people are created equally. Like my brother is a pediatrician and I watched his like progress of like going to undergrad, grad school, medical school, internships, doing this and like studying 15, 16, 17 hours a day, like working his ass off to like just to get to where he is. And then I also know doctors who barely worked at all, have a perfect photographic memory. I have a friend who's a genius just naturally. He reads one thing, he remembers it for the rest of his life. He's like, medical school was easy for him, like all these things. Like that's times I get mad. Or like you meet this person who like is 9 years old, never touched a piano in his life, perfect pitch, here's a song, he's like, oh, I can do this. And you're like, not everyone's created equally.
It also makes me wonder if there's like a hidden skill or talent that I have, like that I just haven't tried, that I'm secretly like that. Like what if every human has some sort of prodigy ability, but like we just don't try enough things to find out what it is?
Yeah, what if you're really good at like spinning plates on a stick, like at the halftime show at basketball games, and you don't know?
I don't like making a mess.
What if you're really good? That's what I think it should just inspire people to go out there and try a whole bunch of shit and see what they like and what they're good at.
I got really excited when I cut an apple in half when I was throwing axes. I'm like, maybe I'm good. Like there were so many shots that I missed. I wasn't like hitting them all dead center. So
isn't it frustrating because like the axe hit the thing, but you just don't get the blade to the board, so it just doesn't stick, and you're like, I'm hitting it, but I'm just not.
There are a couple, but then once you learn, you can do it pretty consistently.
Oh, really?
It's badass. Yeah.
I was just thinking though, another fun thing to do if you have like a friend that wants to do it with you is like an adaptation from a book to movie would be like if you read the Grimm's fairy tales and then watch like Snow White and see like how they Disneyfied it. That would be kind of cool because I've never read any of those old fairy tales, but I know they're dark and they're kind of messed up. Well, it's sort of the Disney movies in a way, but like, I don't know. That would be kind of fun.
Well, if you ever want to do that and come back on the show, I would love to have you.
We'll see how many people I scared off in my Game of Thrones comments if they even want me back. But then
that sounds so like that guy gets Game of Thrones, don't bring him back. I'm like, sorry guys,
It's funny. Like I watched like 2 seasons of that. I watched the first season and the last season, so I bookended the show.
Why the fuck would you do something like that?
Because when the last season came out and everyone was talking about it nonstop and having these viewing parties, I was like, it's Sunday night and I can't hang out with anyone because everyone's going to watch Game of Thrones. I'm like, I might as well watch with them.
But that is a perfect recipe for disaster because you're not able to fall in love with the characters that way.
I don't want to. I gave up. After I watched the first season, I was like, I don't care. So that I was okay with not getting into it. And again, now I'm probably just scaring your audience away more now. But
I have a theory that you didn't want to get into it because you didn't want to be like everybody else.
I would support some of that theory. I do tend to go away things that become very popular.
Yeah.
A lot of it's for good reason. Like there are shows and movies that become insanely popular and I'm just like, I can't. And then I get angry and you've never even seen it. And then I watch it and then I still like This Is Us. I know is a really popular show.
I love This Is Us.
But it's just, it's like The Road or Room or any of Lovely Bones. It's like, I don't want to watch depressing real shit just for the sake of it. That's going to make me sad. I like watching things that are going to like hold a theme and inspire you to like change your life or be introspective about something. But just like regurgitating sadness in your face is like, I'm not going to do it. I can't handle it. Like, life is full of that already. I need to like.
You're pretty protective of your energy as a human, I've noticed.
I mean, that's why also like, I think it's important to be, up to date with, culture, the news, current events, these types of things. But there are people out there that I know personally that like inundate themselves with like negative news around the world all the time. And they're like bringing up things that are happening. And I don't think as human beings, we're meant to be exposed to all that. Like we've evolved to have like our circle of communities that we're like up to date with these things. But like when you're talking to me, like I know there's bad shit. Like that's why I don't like watching documentaries that much, because part of me wants to be aware of these things, but it's like, it just makes you more and more and more aware of like so much of the bad that's going on. I like watching uplifting documentaries of like good things that are going on or call to arms of things that you can help in the world. But if you're just watching like another fucking like village being destroyed in Southeast Asia, it's like I can't. Like I can't.
I know, but I also think that that's kind of a you thing. And I was almost going to say problem, but it's not a problem. It's a you thing also, because you're sort of like me in that when you're surrounded by something negative, you tend to take on people's stuff.
Yeah, I consider myself.
And a lot of people, I don't know how they do it, are able to cut off that part of them. Like they can look at something objectively and not involve themselves in that way.
Yeah, I mean, even when I'm talking to someone in a conversation, I try to read the room or read them and then like create my responses and conversation that's going to be in line with where I think their boundaries are. You know what I mean? Like I think like.
What about your boundaries?
But I always put them second because they're not that important to me in terms of like, I'm not calling myself the Jesus figure. I'm just saying,
okay.
I'm just saying that, like, I feel like I have an ability, like I can absorb negative or like physical or mental or emotional pain. I can deal with it. I feel like I'd rather deal with it. I'm not even a parent, but I could assume that's what it feels like to be a parent, where like parents would rather take on all the pain of their kids than have their kid go through a day of suffering, right?
Yeah.
I've even heard like my mom tell me that at a point, like when I was in the hospital, for instance, she's like, I wish I could trade places with you. But like me sitting in the hospital bed in pain, that I would like, no, mom, like I would rather be in this bed for 20 years than you be here. It's that same thing. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do that for everyone. There's some people in the world that I'm like, now you deserve a little pain. Go fuck yourself. But I don't know. I think that's why I do like this One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because you deal with a lot of like how much struggle McMurphy went through and how you had this guy that was perfectly fine. I mean, not perfectly fine. He was flawed, but like ends up, dying in the end. But his death was not in vain. Like it caused a shift in the eyes of the reader, and it caused a shift in the eyes of all the characters in the book. So like, I kind of I would try to do things more in that regard. Like be not a martyr, but someone who's like, if everyone had that mentality and they kind of like put society and their others first, then the world might be a better place. But we'll see. And that's where the ego comes into play when we were talking about that. Where like the more you can depress and suppress your own ego, the easier time you're going to have to let other people in and like understand.
But it is there for a very good reason.
To survive and spread your genes to the next generation. That's literally the only reason. But
I also think it's a good measurement for understanding how you relate to other people.
Yes. But when you put labels or you try to like construct a tangible thing of your ego and compare it to someone else, I think you've already lost the battle of doing that. Does that make sense?
But I also think maybe that's a human version of not subjecting yourself to negativity.
Yeah, because maybe. I need therapy probably, don't worry.
That could be a problem with you, but it could be a problem with who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think if people, I mean, it's like people need to be a little more introspective always. That's why I also like The Scarlet Letter because, or just the theme of it. The book's kind of dreary, but like,
I honestly like don't like that it's required reading.
I like the theme of it. I think if I think just for the sake of the theme, if every student left the classroom understanding that theme, it was worth reading. The book itself, I honestly tried rereading it like 2 years ago, and I don't know when it was written, like the 1800s or something. It was like
I don't know.
it's almost harder to read than Shakespeare because it's just like this language is just like, and it's another reason why I know she's a very fan. But like reading some of like Jane Austen, who's a great author now, I
I
can't.
love Prejudice.
I know. It's just, I mean, they're good. It's just like, I don't know. I can't get into it. But the themes and like where the authors are trying to get at, especially with, but this book, do you think it holds up today? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I think there are lots of aspects that are outdated, but I feel like the general themes do hold up.
It reminds me of Shawshank. Like in
Reminds you what?
Shawshank Redemption, in terms of like, it holds up enough, but you could tell it's a little dated in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things the book tackled, where like they were saying how like lobotomies and shock treatment therapies, they were on the way out.
Yeah.
But Ratched was trying to hold on to this conformity system about doing those things and having control. And even though it was kind of on the way out, so he kind of, even the author was like aware that like things are changing, but there's still this level of like, we want to keep it the way things are.
Yeah.
And it was changing for the bad because you had all those white people trying to change the Native American way of lifestyle, what they thought was being evolved. But in reality, if you look at it, maybe it was devolving, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to like my close friends who know me, they think I'm crazy because I think like the downfall of human civilization was when we had agriculture, like 10,000 years ago. Like if we were still hunter-gatherers, we'd be a lot more in tune with our nature than we are now. But that's just my crazy opinion.
I mean, there are lots of benefits that came from that.
Yeah, but those benefits are subjective. I told you I was going to argue with everything, but I'm just saying that's for another podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like everything at some point is going to be outdated when it comes to literature, but the themes are what are always going to stick.
Like, do you think in 50 years from now, books are still going to be a thing?
I hope so.
I do too, but I don't know. I mean, I know people right now who like it's starting to shift. Like I know a lot of people who say like which is fine, who are like they're not reading as much. They say they're listening to audiobooks, and then that's going to shift, and then that's going to shift, and then that's going to shift to the point where like you're not really reading a story anymore. I don't know if it's ever going to go away, but I wonder if like books are still going to be super popular in 50 years from now. That they are.
That's a great question. I really hope they are. I also really enjoy an audiobook. Honestly, this one was probably one of the coolest ones.
I will go back and listen to it because I just like John C. Reilly, and I think it'll be cool to hear the performance.
He has an excellent voice, just generally. He has a beautiful like way of speaking, beautiful tone of voice, but like he really performed the shit out of it. But I also was like, there were times where I was like I'd flip it on and off. Like I didn't listen to the whole audiobook for this. Like I would read and sometimes I would listen and read at the same time. And I do notice that I started listening more because my attention span is going and I fucking can't stand it. And it's because of like so much social media, TV. It's hard for me to sit down and focus. So it makes sense that like there would be a decline in reading because we are just hit with light all the time and we expect things really quickly, and reading is kind of a more leisurely thing.
But it's funny that you say that because I really can't listen to audiobooks because of that reason. I don't have the attention span for audiobooks. Because
really?
It's a passive medium and you're listening, my mind immediately wants to wander and do something else. But like when I'm reading,
are you more of a visual learner, or because I feel like I'm an auditory learner?
No, definitely visual. Like listening is great. I mean, it adds to it. But for me, like if I'm reading a book, I can get into it and really read it. If I'm listening to an audiobook, I get distracted. You know, like people read a page and they're like, I don't even know what I just read. I got to go back and read it. Right?
Yeah.
I do that with audiobooks. Like I'll be listening to an audiobook and I'll just like zone out because I'm not the one reading it. I'm not doing this. So like I've tried audiobooks and I can't get into them. Like I remember I had a subscription to Audible that I forgot about. And so I ended up like every month paying for like new books. So after like a year, I bought like 12 books and I'm like, all right, I might as well download 12 books. So I started listening to them and I never got through a full one, not once, because I just kept getting distracted and not being able to do it. And maybe it's like, I don't know. So that's why like reading, I would have to like, if I was going to listen to the John C. Reilly version, I'd have to be with the book in hand, reading and listening it. I couldn't do that, but that's just preference. I know people who love audiobooks and they really absorb the material. Just like a personal thing. I guess I can't do it. I don't know.
I just like learned it's like a whole nother performance medium. And now I, as an actor, like I would really love to tackle an audiobook because you have to take over different characters and it's totally different. It would be really cool.
Like being a voice actor on steroids, because you have to do all the, because you have to separate the narrator voice from each character. Mm-hmm. Although this is different. Like I said, I have to read and watch at the same time. Like Watchmen, the graphic novel. Mm-hmm. There's this really good YouTube. I don't know if it would start off at you, like where they show the panels of the book on screen, and then they have the narrator do the audiobook of the panels that are popping up. So you're like seeing it, reading it, and listening to it all at once. And he goes through all the different characters, even the girl voices and everything. The same guy, and that was really well done. But I don't. It's a graphic novel, so you kind of have to see it. You can't just listen to that audiobook. But like that I enjoyed. But I don't think I can if like a new book came out, it was like a New York Times bestseller, and you said, here's the audiobook of it, give it a listen. I don't think I'd ever get through it.
I really kind of regret not setting an alarm and getting up to listen to the reading of The Hobbit by
Andy Serkis.
Yes, by Andy Serkis.
Yeah, you didn't have 18 hours to kill or however long it took. I don't
like 4 in the morning. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Where can our listeners follow you today or any day?
Well, even though we talked a lot about books and movies today, I'm a personal trainer and strength and conditioning specialist. So if they're interested in any fitness questions or interested in getting started in training, they can reach me at my email, which is jedbergpt@gmail.com, or they can find me on Instagram at jedbergfitness. And I have a photography page too if they're interested, J. Edberg Photography. They want to check out some cool shots.
Yeah, you guys follow his photography account. It's absolutely beautiful. And he's a badass trainer. If you check out his Instagram, you'll be able to see why. I also want to take this opportunity to let our listeners know, remind you guys that if there's any fan fiction that you write yourselves and are willing to share so that I could share it on the podcast, you can email me at basedonshow@gmail.com. Thank you again to Jeremy. Jeremy, are there any book or movie recommendations that you have or anything that you're working on or friends are working on that you would like to share with our listeners? Time to plug.
Fair enough.
Plug away.
Well, I'm going to plug a book that my grandfather wrote. My grandfather, he's 92 years old. He is a Holocaust survivor from Poland, and he wrote a book called The Compassion of a Deadly Enemy, and it took him 20 years to write it. It's basically his life story, focusing mostly on the events in and surrounding World War II and the Holocaust. So if you want to do a deep dive and get a firsthand perspective on someone who went through that, and see what it was like. It's really well written, and he wrote it all by himself. I'm really proud of him. He, like I said, it took him 20 years to write, and he just published it last year. He's in his early 90s now, and it's a really captivating read. And even though I heard most of the stories growing up, seeing some of the details and just kind of putting yourself in the mindset of something like that gives a lot of perspective on things. So I would check that out for sure. You can get it on Amazon. There's paperback available. And again, David Lenga is the author, Lenga, and it's called The Compassion of a Deadly Enemy.
I'm about halfway through it, and I really recommend it. It's super accessible. It's super compelling. You get to learn a lot about that time period and his story, and I'm very excited to actually continue reading it today. So definitely check that out.
Very cool. And movies, I am a big fan of a lot of not necessarily indie movies, but kind of movies that have that type of feel, kind of like happy-go-lucky. especially when there's like a lot of innocence involved. And there was like 3 movies that kind of, I think, all pieced together that if you want really good, heartwarming, feel good kind of movies, I think all these 3 kind of fall into the same category. The first one I just recently saw on Amazon called Troop Zero. And it's about a kind of misfit group of Girl Scouts that kind of get together to compete in a competition to get their voices on one of that golden disc that shot out into space. I think that Carl Sagan talked about.
I didn't hear about any of this.
Really? It's amazing. And it's got a great cast. Jim Gaffigan plays the little girl's dad, and Viola Davis is like one of the main actresses in it. She's fantastic. It's called Troop Zero, and it's about, a group of little kids, all really good actors. And it kind of brings to mind the other 2 movies I was going to recommend, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's a movie with Shia LaBeouf called Peanut Butter Falcon. Go out and watch it. It didn't really get enough love, I think. It's a super, really heartwarming movie. And the last one would be Call of the Wanderlings, or I think that's what it's called, but Taika Waititi, who did What We Do in the Shadows and Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit, had this movie. He's a New Zealand director, hilarious, really well done. And it's just kind of a cool movie about a relationship between a grandfather and his grandson. Go out and watch that as well.
Love it. I like your choices. Excellent. So, guys, we have come to the end of our episode with Jeremy. Thank you so much. This was based on what?
Oh, just said thank you.
Thank you. This is based on an adaptation podcast. I'm Pamela Portnoy. We'll have a new episode out to you every other Monday. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Based On Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to our guest, Jeremy Edberg. And thank you to Tiffany Haymoth, Jackson Palmer, Claire Palmer, Maya Ashkenazi, Jordan Ross Weinhold, Jason Crow, and Soundwork Studios. Bye.